Okay, so picture this for a second. You've spent years training your mind to handle these intense life or death scenarios.
Right, huh?
You understand the complex pharmacology of a beta blocker. You can interpret the chaotic spikes of an EKG under immense pressure.
Yeah, you're totally prepared.
Exactly. You have the bedside manner to calm a terrified patient. You are, by all accounts, ready to be a brilliant nurse. But then you are denied entry to a nursing program because, well, you placed a comma in the wrong spot on your entrance exam.
I mean, it sounds completely absurd when you frame it like that, right? A whole medical career derailed by a punctuation mark.
But for anyone prepping for the TEAS or HESI nursing entrance exams, that's the terrifying reality.
Yeah.
You step out of the objective scientific world of anatomy and physiology, and suddenly you are dropped into the subjective, murky waters of grammar.
Oh, absolutely.
And it feels like the test makers are just trying to trip you up on purpose.
Well, they absolutely are setting traps. I mean, there's no doubt about it. But the key to surviving this section of the exam isn't to become a perfect, poetic writer.
Right.
The examiners are really simply checking if you can recognize a highly specific, recurring set of structural errors under pressure.
Which is why, if you are listening to this, consider this deep dive your shortcut through the maze. We are pulling from a comprehensive source guide on common grammar errors, but we are not just going to read you a dry list of rules.
No, nobody wants that.
Exactly. We are looking at the exact traps the exam set, the cognitive glitches in our brains that make us fall for them, and a multi-million-dollar lawsuit proving why grammar is ultimately a critical patient safety issue. Okay, let's unpack this. To beat the exam, we first have to understand the very specific, almost bizarre game the test makers are playing.
Yeah, and understand that game, you really have to look at the matrix of language itself. Linguists generally view language through one of two frameworks. It's either descriptive grammar or prescriptive grammar.
Okay, break those down for me.
So, modern linguists are almost entirely descriptive. They view language kind of like a wildlife documentary.
Like, just observing?
Exactly. They just watch how fluent speakers naturally use words in the wild. And if communication happens successfully, they document it as valid grammar.
Okay, so under descriptive grammar, if I say to a friend, me and him went to the store, and my friend understands that we bought groceries, a linguist says, cool, that's language.
Yep, 100%. It worked, so it's valid.
But I have a very strong feeling the nursing exam does not take the wildlife documentary approach.
No. The exam operates in a completely different universe.
Yeah.
Standardized tests require one objectively defensible, mathematically correct answer to put on a scoring key.
Because they have to grade thousands of these things.
Right. Therefore, they rely entirely on prescriptive grammar. This is a rigid, codified rulebook of objective rights and wrongs. It dictates how language supposedly should be used, regardless of how real people actually talk.
It's like the difference between the official NBA rulebook and how people actually play street ball on the weekend.
Yeah, that's a great way to put it.
Like, out on the neighborhood court, which is descriptive grammar, you might take an extra step, carry the ball a little, and as long as the game flows, nobody cares.
Right. Everybody's just having fun.
But the standardized exam forces you to play strictly by the NBA rulebook. You travel by half an inch, they are blowing the whistle and canceling your score.
That analogy perfectly captures the tension test takers feel. And what's fascinating here is the origin of that strict NBA rulebook for English.
Right. Where did it even come from?
Well, we tend to assume these grammar laws were handed down on stone tablets, or derived from deep scientific logic. But they were actually cobbled together during a very narrow historical window, mostly mid to late 18th century England.
Wait, are you serious? The rules determining whether a modern student gets into nursing school today were made up in the 1700s.
Almost entirely, yeah. We can trace a huge chunk of this to an Anglican bishop named Robert Lowth.
A bishop?
Yeah, a bishop who published a wildly influential grammar book in 1762. Lowth essentially looked at English, decided it was too messy and chaotic, and took it upon himself to formalize it.
Wow.
He spent his time combing through the King James Bible and the works of Shakespeare purely to point out their grammatical errors.
That is just, the arrogance to look at Shakespeare and say, yeah, this guy doesn't know how to write.
Oh, he was supremely confident. And the main tool he used to fix English was Latin. Lowth believed Latin was the ultimate logical superior language, so he just imported Latin rules and grafted them onto English, even when they made absolutely no structural sense.
Give me an example of a Latin rule that got shoehorned into English, like something we'd recognize today.
Okay, the famous rule, never split an infinitive. We are taught never to put a word between to and the verb, like saying to boldly go.
Right, the Star Trek line.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Well, in Latin, an infinitive verb is a single word. It is physically impossible to split it.
Oh, I see.
But in English, an infinitive is two words. Lowth decided that because Latin couldn't split its verbs, English shouldn't either.
That is so arbitrary.
It really is. Then, a few decades later, in 1795, an American lawyer named Lindley Murray packaged Lowth's rules into a textbook that became the standard in American schoolrooms.
Our sources also point to Strunk and White's The Elements of Style, which, feels like the modern Bible for this stuff. I had to buy a copy in college.
A lot of us did. William Strunk Jr. self-published it in 1918, and E.B. White later revised it. It cemented these 18th century preferences into the 20th century.
So it just kept snowballing.
Yep. And what is incredibly ironic is that modern linguists have thoroughly analyzed the elements of style and proven that Strunk and White routinely violated their own strict grammar rules within the pages of that very book.
That is hilarious. They couldn't even follow their own rules.
Exactly. But history aside, this inflexible, centuries-old framework is exactly the rule book that TEAS and HESI exams are testing.
Knowing that we are being tested on a rigid, imported rule book actually helps. It means we aren't crazy for thinking English feels unnatural sometimes.
Right. It validates that feeling.
The test makers know where our modern natural speech conflicts with the 18th century rulebook, and they build their traps right on those fault lines.
They absolutely do.
The source material outlines several high-yield traps that show up constantly. So let's look at how they weaponize our own brains against us, starting with how we process the subject of a sentence.
Okay, so the test writers are masters of camouflage. The prescriptive rule is simple. The verb must agree with the true subject of the sentence. But the exam will almost never put the subject and the verb next to each other.
They separate them.
Right. They use prepositional phrases to create distance and trick your ear. A classic exam sentence would be, "The box of nails is on the shelf."
Let me guess the cognitive glitch here. My brain hears the word nails right next to the verb. Nails is plural, so my ear instantly expects the plural verb are, like nails are on the shelf. It just sounds so much better.
Yet your brain has a proximity bias. It wants to match the verb to whatever noun is physically closest. But of nails is just a prepositional phrase acting as camouflage.
So it's just distracting you.
Exactly. The true subject is the singular box. So the correct prescriptive phrasing is, "The box is."
You really have to train your eyes to cross out those prepositional phrases when you read the exam question. Just visually delete "of nails," and the sentence becomes so obvious.
Related.
I imagine they do something similar with collective nouns like a team or a jury.
Oh, collective nouns are prime bait. In American English, a collective noun takes a singular verb. Even though we all know a team is made up of multiple people, you have to write, "The team is ready," not "the team are ready."
That feels related to another major trap the sources bring up, indefinite pronouns. Words like everyone, anyone, each. When I talk to my friends, I would absolutely say, everyone needs to bring their ID to the clinic.
Yeah, pretty much everyone says that.
Because I'm visualizing a crowd of people, so I use the plural pronoun there.
And descriptively, you are communicating perfectly, but prescriptively. Indefinite pronouns are strictly singular. The exam demands that you pair them with singular pronouns.
So I'd have to say,
You must choose the option that says everyone must bring his or her ID.
ugh, his or her just sounds so clinky and robotic.
It really does.
But again, NBA rulebook, we have to play the game. Now, let's talk about how the exam tests our sense of structure and glue, specifically commas. I feel like commas are where people just start guessing based on vibes.
Vibes are dangerous here. Relying on vibes is exactly why people fall into the comma splice trap. A comma splice is when you attempt to join two complete independent sentences together using only a comma.
Okay, give me an example.
For example, the patient felt dizzy. She sat down.
I see why that happens.
No.
When we speak, we naturally take a breath or pause between those two thoughts. And we have been taught since grade school that a comma represents a pause. So we just drop a comma wherever we would take a breath.
Yeah, you've hit on the exact mechanism of the error. We confuse spoken conversational cadence with written mechanical syntax. A comma is a weak joint.
It's not strong enough.
Exactly. It does not have the structural integrity to hold two independent clauses together. You need a stronger joint, a period, a semicolon, or you have to add a coordinating conjunction, like the word so.
Right.
The exam loves to present four nearly identical sentences and ask which is correct. The trick is to hunt for the weak joint, the comma splice.
That structural confusion leads us beautifully into how test makers mess with our spatial reasoning. Modifiers. A modifier is just a descriptive phrase, right? Like an adjective on steroids.
Yeah, think of a modifier as a magnet. It must firmly attach to the exact noun it is meant to describe, and structurally, that means sitting immediately next to it.
And when it doesn't.
When it gets separated, we get dangling or misplaced modifiers, which create completely unintended, often hilarious meanings.
The source guide had a great example of this, and it feels like a bad magic trick where you accidentally saw the wrong person in half.
Let's hear it.
So if a student writes, "Walking down the hall, the fire alarm went off." Structurally, because fire alarm is the first noun after the comma, the sentence literally states that the fire alarm grew legs and went for a stroll down the corridor.
The visual absurdity is the best way to remember the rule. You magically gave the alarm legs. To fix the magic trick, you must place the actual human doing the walking immediately after the comma.
So it should be, walking down the hall, the nurse heard the fire alarm.
Exactly. The magnet is now attached to the correct metal.
Speaking of small things causing massive visual confusion, we have to talk about apostrophes. Specifically, the battle between it's with an apostrophe and it's without one.
Oh, this one gets everybody.
It breaks my brain, because usually an apostrophe plus "es" means possession, the doctor's stethoscope, the patient's chart. So naturally, if something belongs to it, my brain wants to use an apostrophe.
It is a totally logical assumption, but English has a massive blind spot here. The rule to lock into your memory is that it's with an apostrophe is always a contraction. It only ever means it is or it has.
So if you can't expand it...
Right. If you cannot substitute it is into the sentence, drop the apostrophe.
So why doesn't the possessive form get an apostrophe?
Because it belongs to a special class of personal pronouns. Think about words like his, hers, yours, theirs. None of those possessive pronouns use an apostrophe. Its follows that same pronoun rule.
Okay, that actually makes a lot of sense when you group it with his and hers.
Yeah, and the exam will also try to trick you by putting apostrophes on regular plural nouns. Just remember, pluralizing a word never requires an apostrophe. The patient's arrived. No apostrophe.
The final major trap the sources emphasize is the dreaded who versus whom. I will admit my strategy for this has usually been to just avoid using whom entirely because it makes me feel like I'm wearing a monocle.
A lot of people do. But the exam won't let you hide from it. The mechanism here relies on subjects and objects. Who is the subject, the person performing the action. Whom is the object, the person receiving the action.
The guide offers a substitution trick for this. You swap in he or she to test for who, and you swap in him or her to test for whom. Let me try to work through one in real time.
Go for it.
Let's say the test asks, blank did the doctor call. Is it who or whom? If I use the trick, I wouldn't say the doctor called he. That sounds ridiculous. I would say the doctor called him. Since him ends with an M, it matches whom, which also ends with an M. So the answer is, whom did the doctor call?
You navigated that perfectly. The him equals whom trick rarely fails. But there is one more structural trap the exam relies on, and it's all about rhythm. Parallel structure.
Okay, what does that look like?
When you create a list or a comparison, every item must share the same grammatical form.
So if I'm writing a nursing resume and I say, my duties include assessing vitals, administering medication, and to document care, the ear immediately catches a stumble on that last item.
Exactly. The rhythm breaks. You established an ing pattern with assessing and administering, so you must carry it through to documenting. The exam will bury a broken parallel structure inside a very long, complex sentence to see if you can spot the mismatched gear.
We have spent all this time on the actual traps, but our source material notes that test takers often lose points because they fall for grammar myths or they mistake stylistic advice for hard grammar rules.
That's a huge issue.
We already touched on Robert Louth and his Latin obsession, which birthed the myth that you can never end a sentence with a preposition.
Yeah, that is perhaps the most famous phantom rule in English. Louth declared it incorrect simply because Latin syntax physically prevents ending a sentence with a preposition.
But in English,
rearranging a sentence to avoid a trailing preposition often results in incredibly awkward, unnatural phrasing.
Winston Churchill supposedly mocked that rule by saying it was a sort of English up with which I will not put. It sounds so clunky.
It does, and while modern style guides recognize it as a phantom rule on a strict, standardized exam, it is safer to be aware of the traditional preference, just in case they decide to be particularly archaic.
Better safe than sorry.
Exactly. But a much more dangerous misconception for nursing students involved the passive voice.
Oh, man. Every English teacher I ever had would circle passive voice in bright red ink. If I wrote, "The medication was administered," they would cross it out and demand, "Who administered it? The nurse administered the medication." Active voice.
Sure, English teachers push active voice because it makes narratives punchier and more engaging, but here is the critical distinction. Passive voice is 100% grammatically correct.
It's not an error.
No, it is a stylistic choice, not a structural error. In a nursing context, passive voice is often necessary. If you say, "the patient was stabilized," the focus is exactly where it should be, on the patient and the outcome, not on the specific medical team that performed the action.
Right, because who cares who did it as long as the patient is okay?
Exactly. Test takers frequently cross out perfectly valid passive sentences because they confuse weak style with a grammar error.
That is a massive relief, honestly. Okay, let's tackle another myth. The idea that a run-on sentence is just a sentence that goes on for too long. I used to think if a sentence took up 3 lines on the page, it was automatically a run-on.
Length is completely irrelevant to the definition of a run-on.
Really?
Yeah, a run-on is purely a structural failure. You could write a beautifully complex 50-word sentence with perfectly placed dependent clauses, conjunctions, and semicolons, and it is grammatically flawless.
Okay.
Conversely, you could write a 6-word sentence like, "I tripped, I fell down," and because it only uses a comma splice, it is a run-on.
Structure over word count. Got it. Now, I do want to push back on one rule the guide brings up regarding word choice. Less versus fewer.
Yeah.
The traditional rule is that fewer is used for countable nouns, like fewer patients, and less is used for uncountable concepts, like less pain or less water. But I go to the grocery store every week, and the express lane always says 10 items or less. Items are clearly countable.
The grocery store express lane is the ultimate linguistic battleground.
Yeah.
Descriptively, the grocery store sign is fine. Everyone understands exactly what it means, and language naturally blurs those boundaries over time. But the test makers know this.
Oh, they use it against us.
They absolutely use the grocery store sign against you. They know your brain is conditioned to see 10 items or less, so they will put that exact phrase on the exam to see if you will enforce the prescriptive rulebook, which demands 10 items or fewer.
Here's where it gets really interesting. We've thrown around a lot of terms today, and the source material provides a sort of map of the linguistic landscape these exams cover. Let's make sure we aren't getting tangled in the jargon. We've got syntax, mechanics, usage, diction, and morphology.
Let's build a house to separate them. Syntax is the architectural blueprint. It is how you arrange words into a sentence to make logical sense, like ensuring your subject and verb agree, or keeping your modifiers attached.
Okay, blueprint is syntax.
Morphology is the raw materials, the bricks themselves. It looks at the internal structure of words, like how adding an S changes a noun from singular to plural.
So syntax is the blueprint, morphology is the bricks. Where do commas fit in?
That is mechanics.
Yeah.
Mechanics is the mortar holding the bricks together. Your punctuation, spelling, and capitalization.
And usage.
Usage is making sure you pick the right type of brick for the job, like choosing fewer instead of less. Finally, diction is the paint color. It is your word choice regarding tone. Are you using formal medical terminology or casual slang?
Okay, and that makes it so much clearer.
And the TEAS and HESI exams primarily test syntax and mechanics, because those are the areas where structural collapse happens.
And structural collapse is a great way to pivot, because it is so easy to sit here and view all this as annoying academic hair splitting. Like, who cares if a modifier dangles? But when we move out of the exam room and into a clinical setting, ignoring these rules has terrifying real-world consequences.
It really does. Grammar precision in healthcare is fundamentally a patient safety issue. Imagine a nurse writing a clinical note with an ambiguous pronoun or a misplaced modifier.
Like what?
Like writing, "The doctor told the patient that he needed a new prescription." Who needs the prescription? The doctor or the patient?
Oh, wow. The ambiguity creates a massive liability.
Exactly. Or consider a missing comma in a list of medication instructions. It can completely alter dosage timings. Nursing programs rely heavily on the grammar sections of these entrance exams because they need absolute proof that you can communicate unambiguously under extreme pressure.
Right. A patient's chart is not the place for creative, fluid language.
No, it requires mechanical precision.
And if anyone doubts that punctuation has severe real-world stakes, the sources bring up the incredible Oxford comma lawsuit from 2017 involving Oakhurst Dairy in Maine.
It is the ultimate cautionary tale. Delivery drivers sued the dairy company for unpaid overtime, and the entire multi-million-dollar lawsuit hinged on a single missing Oxford comma in a state labor law.
Just one comma.
One comma. The law listed duties that were exempt from overtime pay, and the final item in the list read, packing for shipment or distribution.
Notice there is no comma before the word or.
Precisely. Because the legislature omitted the Oxford comma, the phrasing became legally ambiguous. Did packing for shipment or distribution describe one single activity done by the packers? Or was packing for shipment one activity and distribution a completely separate activity done by the drivers?
So the drivers argued that because there was no comma separating the ideas, they were distinct, meaning the drivers who only distributed the milk weren't exempt and actually deserved overtime pay.
And the court agreed. The judges ruled that the lack of punctuation created enough ambiguity to favor the drivers. That single missing comma resulted in a $5 million settlement.
$5 million for a missing speck of ink.
Yep.
But even with stakes that high, language still refuses to be fully tamed. It continues to evolve and rebel against the 18th century bishops.
It always will, and the exam struggles to keep up. Take the singular they. We discussed earlier how the exam rigidly demands his or her for indefinite pronouns, yet English speakers have used they as a singular pronoun since Chaucer in the 14th century.
Really? That far back?
Yeah. Shakespeare used it. Jane Austen used it. In 2019, Merriam-Webster even named it Word of the Year. But the standardized tests stubbornly penalize it, enforcing a rule that ignores both modern reality and centuries of history.
We even mentioned earlier that Jeffrey Pullum, a highly respected linguist, published an essay titled 50 Years of Stupid Grammar Advice, where he publicly dismantled Strunk and White.
He really went after them.
He proved they didn't even understand the basic concepts they were preaching. Yet, their rulebook is still treated as gospel on these tests.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, it reveals the dual life of a modern nursing student.
How so?
You are essentially being asked to operate in two completely different linguistic worlds. You have to understand the fluid, sometimes messy reality of how your patients actually communicate their pain and symptoms, but you must master the rigid 18th century precision required to pass your exams and maintain flawless patient charts.
It is a delicate, exhausting balance, but that is why we do these deep dives. When you sit down for that exam, don't just read the sentences. Look for the structural architecture. Hunt for the traps.
Yes, hunt for the traps.
Cross out the prepositional camouflage so your verb matches your true subject. Remember that a comma is too weak to glue two complete thoughts together. Don't let your modifiers dangle and grow legs, and always verify that it's with an apostrophe can be replaced with it is. So what does this all mean?
Wow.
It means learning these bizarre centuries-old rules isn't just an annoying hurdle to get your nursing degree. It is about training your brain for relentless precision. It is about ensuring that when you write a patient's chart, there is zero room for ambiguity. You are mastering grammar to protect future lives.
That is the ultimate goal. And I want to leave you with one final, slightly maddening thought from our source material regarding how weird the human brain is when it processes language.
Okay, hit me.
Think about the common phrase, I could care less. If you break that phrase down logically, it means the exact opposite of what people intend. The logical structural form is, I couldn't care less, meaning your level of care has hit rock bottom.
Right, if you could care less, it implies you still have some care left to give. It is completely backwards.
Yet, I could care less has spread like wildfire, and listeners process it idiomatically without a second thought. Everyone instantly knows it means the person doesn't care. Which raises an important question for the future. If a phrase can mean the literal structural opposite of its words and still be perfectly flawlessly understood by society, what does that say about the future of standardized testing? Will there eventually be a breaking point where the strict logical correctness demanded by exams like the TEAS and HESI completely surrenders to common usage? Or will the medical field, with its intense need for safety and clarity, forever require a rulebook frozen in the 18th century?
A fantastic philosophical puzzle to chew on while you memorize pronoun rules. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. Keep an eye out for those dangling modifiers in the wild. Trust your training and go crush your exam.